The morning sun peeked through the tall windows of Suite 712 at the Grand Plaza Hotel in Amsterdam. Annika Visser hummed softly as she tucked fresh white sheets under the mattress with practiced movements. Her hands moved quickly. 15 years of making beds had turned the task into muscle memory. Outside the window, canal boats glided by, carrying tourists who pointed cameras at the historic buildings. Annika rarely had time to look anymore. There were 12 more rooms waiting for her today. She sprayed glass cleaner on the bathroom mirror and wiped it in perfect circles. At 43, Annika's reflection showed a woman with kind eyes and hair pulled back neatly under her hotel cap. The blue uniform she wore had been designed to blend into the background. Not too noticeable, just like the people who wore them. Almost done, she whispered to herself, checking her watch. Her daughter Lena would be waiting at the school gates in 4 hours, and Annika never liked to be late. As she fluffed the last pillow, she thought about her children. Lena was 16 now, smart and full of dreams, while Thomas at 20 was already in his second year of university. How they had grown since Johan had passed away. 8 years without him, and still sometimes Annika reached across the bed at night expecting to find him there. In the hallway, voices approached, American businessmen heading out for meetings. Annika stepped aside, pressing her cleaning cart against the wall to make room. They walked past without a glance, talking loudly about stock prices and dinner reservations. "Thank you," one man said automatically, as she nodded respectfully. He never looked at her face. This was normal. The wealthy guests rarely saw the people who made their beds and cleaned their bathrooms. It hadn't always bothered her, but lately, Annika felt the invisibility more deeply. Perhaps it was because Thomas had asked her last weekend why she hadn't pursued her dreams of becoming a translator. "You speak more languages than my professor, Mom," he had said. "You could be teaching instead of cleaning." She had just smiled and changed the subject. Dreams were for people with choices. When Johan died unexpectedly of a heart attack, leaving her with a 7-year-old and a 12-year-old, choices had become luxuries she couldn't afford. Back in Suite 712, Annika checked the minibar and noted which items needed replacing on her clipboard. She wrote in perfect English, just as she spoke it, without any trace of an accent. Besides Dutch and English, she also spoke German, French, and Spanish fluently. Languages had always come naturally to her. In university, before she met Johan and before the children came, she had studied linguistics. Those textbooks were still on her shelf at home, though their spines were dusty now. Sometimes when the apartment was quiet, she would open them and remember how it felt to have different possibilities ahead. The hotel phone in her pocket buzzed, startling her. The display showed her daughter's school number. "Hello?" she answered in Dutch, balancing the phone between her ear and shoulder as she continued to check items off her list. "Mrs. Visser? This is Mrs. Backer from administration," the school secretary said. "I'm calling about Lena's upcoming field trip to Brussels." Annika continued working as they spoke, explaining that she had already sent the permission slip, but would send the payment tomorrow after she got paid. She moved to the bathroom, folding fresh towels into perfect rectangles while discussing the details. "Yes, I understand they need special insurance for crossing borders," she said, arranging the toiletries in a neat line. "Lena is very excited about practicing her French. She says her teacher thinks she has a natural ear for languages, just like—" She turned around and froze mid-sentence. A tall man with silver hair at his temples stood in the doorway watching her. His expensive suit and confidence marked him as a guest, not hotel staff. "I'm sorry," Annika quickly said to the phone. "I must go now. I'll bring the payment tomorrow." She switched to English as she addressed the man. "I apologize, sir. I'll be out of your way immediately." The man tilted, his head slightly studying her with interest. "No rush," he said in Dutch, his accent indicating it wasn't his first language. "I just forgot my laptop." Annika nodded and moved to leave, embarrassed at being caught on a personal call. She had never been reprimanded for it before, but hotel policy was clear about personal matters during work hours. "Your Dutch is excellent," the man commented, walking to the desk to retrieve a slim silver computer. "Very pure Amsterdam dialect?" "Yes," she replied, surprised by the observation. Few tourists could distinguish Dutch dialects. I grew up near Jordan. The man switched to English. And your English is perfect, too. How many languages do you speak? Annika hesitated, wondering why he was asking. Guests rarely showed interest in the staff's lives. 5, she admitted. Dutch, English, German, French, and Spanish. His eyebrows rose. 5 languages? That's impressive. She shrugged slightly, uncomfortable with the attention. It's nothing special, just something I picked up. The man, whose name she now remembered from the guest register was Lars Hendrickson, looked at her uniform, then back at her face. And, yet you're cleaning hotel rooms? The question might have seemed rude from someone else, but his tone held genuine curiosity rather than judgment. Life doesn't always follow our plans, sir, she replied simply, keeping her voice professional. Will you need anything else for your room today? He seemed about to say something more, then shook his head. No, thank you. She nodded politely and pushed her cart toward the door. As she left, she could feel his eyes following her, but she didn't look back. The brief conversation had already taken up too much time, and she had many rooms left to clean. What Annika didn't know was that this chance encounter would change everything. The next day would bring a surprise that would turn her carefully structured world upside down. But for now, she continued down the hallway to the next room, invisible once more. In the service elevator, Annika checked her schedule. She still had the entire 5th floor to complete before her shift ended. As the elevator descended to collect fresh supplies, she allowed herself just a moment to close her eyes and breathe. Then, straightening her shoulders, she stepped out when the doors opened, ready to continue her day like any other. She had no way of knowing that Lars Hendrickson was not an ordinary hotel guest, or that he was already making a phone call that would set extraordinary events in motion. Lars Hendrickson stood in the doorway of his hotel suite longer than he needed to. Something about the cleaning lady had caught his attention in a way he couldn't quite explain. In his world of business meetings and investment decisions, people, like her, usually blended into the background, necessary but unnoticed, but this woman was different. The way she had switched effortlessly between languages, the depth of vocabulary she used while speaking Dutch on the phone, it wasn't the simple conversation he would expect from someone in her position. There was an intelligence and education in her speech that didn't match the uniform she wore. Lars walked to the window of his penthouse suite and looked out over Amsterdam's canals. The morning light sparkled on the water, but his mind was elsewhere. As founder and CEO of Global Talk Technologies, he had built his fortune by recognizing patterns that others missed. His translation software company had revolutionized international communication, and he had a knack for spotting talent. He picked up his phone and dialed his assistant. Peter, I need you to find out something about a staff member here at the hotel. Back on the 4th floor, Annika was having a difficult morning. One of her co-workers had called in sick, which meant double the rooms to clean and half the time to do it. Her back ached as she pushed her heavy cart down the hallway. The conversation with the wealthy guest earlier had rattled her more than she wanted to admit. Annika, the manager wants to see you, called Beatrice, another cleaner who had worked at the Grand Plaza even longer than she had. Annika felt a surge of worry. Did he say why? Beatrice shrugged. No idea. But Mr. Visser doesn't usually call people in unless there's a problem. As Annika made her way to the manager's office, she mentally reviewed her morning. Had the guest complained about finding her on the phone? Or perhaps someone had reported that she spent too long in the rooms. With extra duties today, she couldn't afford to lose this job. Mr. Visser's door was open when she arrived. Come in, Annika, he said, gesturing to a chair. His expression gave nothing away. Is everything all right, sir? She asked, perching on the edge of the seat. One of our VIP guests has asked about you, he said, studying her face. Annika's stomach tightened. Is there a problem with one of the rooms? No problem at all. Quite the opposite. Mr. Hendrickson from Suite 712 was impressed by something and asked for information about you. Relief washed over her, quickly followed by confusion. About me? Why would he? A knock at the door interrupted her question. The door swung open to reveal Lars Hendrickson himself, looking even more imposing in daylight. His tailored suit probably cost more than Annika earned in 3 months. "Mr. Hendrickson," the manager said, standing quickly. "Please come in." Lars entered with a friendly nod. "Thank you for arranging this, Mr. Visser." He turned to Annika with a smile. "And thank you, Mrs. Visser, for agreeing to speak with me." Annika hadn't agreed to anything. She hadn't been given a choice, but she nodded politely, still confused about why this important man wanted to talk to her. "I'll give you some privacy," the manager said, excusing himself and closing the door behind him. Alone with the businessman, Annika felt self-conscious in her uniform. She straightened her posture and waited. "I apologize for the formal setting," Lars began, taking the seat across from her. "I wanted to continue our conversation from this morning about your language abilities." He switched to Dutch. "And this time Annika noticed the accent more clearly. "Your Dutch is very good," she said cautiously. "But I think it's not your first language." Lars smiled. "Danish, actually. My grandparents were Dutch, though. They moved to Copenhagen before the war." He shifted to perfect German. "I also speak German and English fluently, and enough French to order dinner without embarrassing myself." Annika responded in German automatically, then caught herself and switched back to Dutch. "Why are you interested in my languages, Mr. Hendrickson?" Instead of answering directly, he asked, "How did you learn 5 languages, Mrs. Visser?" Annika hesitated. It had been years since anyone had asked about her education or abilities. "I studied linguistics at university," she admitted. "I didn't finish my degree, but languages always came naturally to me." "And now you clean hotel rooms," Lars said, not unkindly. Annika felt a flicker of defensiveness. "It's honest work that pays the bills. I have 2 children to support." "Of course," he said quickly. "I didn't mean to suggest otherwise. I'm just curious how someone with your obvious talents ended up here." The question touched a tender spot. Annika looked down at her hands, calloused, from years of scrubbing and folding. "My husband died 8 years ago," she said quietly. "I had a 7-year-old and a 12-year-old. I needed steady work with health insurance. The hotel offered both." Understanding crossed Lars's face. "And dreams get put aside when survival is on the line?" His perception surprised her. Most wealthy people she encountered couldn't imagine making such choices. "What did you want to be?" he asked. "Before life took a different turn?" "A translator," she answered without hesitation. "I wanted to work for the European Union or the United Nations, helping people understand each other." Lars nodded thoughtfully. "And your children? What do they want to be?" The question made Annika smile despite herself. "Thomas is studying computer science. He wants to develop educational software. Lena is still in high school, but she loves biology. She talks about becoming a doctor." "You must be very proud," Lars said. "I am. But university is expensive. Thomas has a small scholarship, but I still work extra shifts to help with his living expenses." She stopped herself, wondering why she was sharing so much with a stranger. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't be talking about personal matters." Lars waved away her concern. "Actually, that's exactly what I wanted to talk about." He leaned forward slightly. "Mrs. Visser, I'll be direct. I'm the founder of Global Talk Technologies. We develop translation software and services, and we're currently expanding our European division here in Amsterdam." Annika nodded. She had seen the company's name on billboards around the city. "We're facing challenges finding qualified multilingual staff," he continued. "People who truly understand the nuances of language and culture." She wasn't sure where this conversation was heading. "I'm sure there are many qualified translators in Amsterdam. With academic credentials, yes. But practical experience and natural talent? That's much harder to find." Lars's eyes were keen as he studied her reaction. "When I overheard you speaking Dutch this morning, I recognized something rare. A true language instinct, combined with practical experience navigating different cultures." Annika felt her cheeks warm at the unexpected praise. No one had acknowledged her abilities in years. Still, she couldn't imagine why this successful businessman was telling her this. "Mr. Hendrickson," she said carefully, "I appreciate your kind words, but I'm not sure I understand why we're having this conversation." Lars smiled. Because, Mrs. Visser, I'd like to offer you a job. The evening sky had turned dark blue above Amsterdam as Lars Hendrickson sat in his temporary office, reviewing documents for tomorrow's meeting. But his mind kept wandering back to the hotel cleaner with the remarkable language skills. He pushed aside the contract papers and pulled out his phone, scrolling to find his head of recruitment. "Nina, it's Lars. I need you to look into something for me," he said when she answered. "We've been struggling to find qualified people for our language quality team, right?" "Absolutely," Nina replied, the frustration clear in her voice even through the phone. "The latest graduates have the degrees but not the practical experience, and the experienced translators want salaries we can't justify based on their skill level." Lars tapped his pen against the desk. "What if I told you I found someone today who speaks 5 languages fluently, has a natural ear for dialect, and has 15 years of practical experience working with people from all over the world?" "I'd say send me their resume immediately," Nina said. "Who is it?" "That's the thing," Lars said, smiling slightly. "She doesn't have a resume, at least not one you'd typically consider. She's a hotel cleaner." A pause. "A hotel cleaner?" "I know how it sounds," Lars admitted. "But I heard her speaking Dutch today, and her language ability is extraordinary. I did some checking. She studied linguistics at university but never finished. Life got in the way." "I trust your judgment, Lars," Nina said carefully. "But our investors expect certain credentials." "Our investors expect results," Lars countered, "and we're not getting them with our current approach." He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the lights reflected in the canal below. "I want you to find out more about her. Her name is Annika Visser. She works at the Grand Plaza." After ending the call, Lars poured himself a glass of water and thought about his own journey. 20 years ago, he had been a junior programmer with an idea, but no connections and no fancy education. If not for one person who had looked beyond his background and given him a chance, Global Talk might never have existed. Sometimes, he thought, the most valuable people were hidden in plain sight. The next morning, Lars arrived early at the hotel restaurant for breakfast. He chose a table with a clear view of the entrance and opened his laptop. Nina had promised to email him whatever information she could find about Annika Visser. When his phone buzzed, he answered quickly. "What did you find?" "Enough to make me interested," Nina said. Annika Visser, 43, widowed 8 years ago when her husband died of a heart attack. 2 children, a son at university and a daughter in high school, started working at the Grand Plaza Hotel 15 years ago as a part-time cleaner while studying linguistics at Amsterdam University. "What happened with her studies?" Lars asked. "She dropped out in her 3rd year when she got pregnant with her daughter. Her husband was a carpenter, steady work, but not high-paying. After he died, she took on extra shifts at the hotel to support the family." Lars frowned. "That's a tough hand to be dealt." "There's more," Nina continued. "I spoke with the hotel manager this morning. He says she's their most requested cleaner for VIP guests because she can communicate with anyone, regardless of where they're from. Apparently, she spends her lunch breaks helping the international staff with translation issues. She's a natural connector," Lars murmured, thinking out loud. The manager also mentioned something interesting. A few years ago, they had a guest from Italy who became seriously ill. The emergency services arrived, but the guest didn't speak English or Dutch, and the paramedics couldn't understand what was wrong. Annika happened to be nearby and translated. The doctor said her quick help might have saved the man's life because they knew exactly what medications he was allergic to. Lars smiled. This was exactly the kind of real-world language application his company needed. "What about her son's university? The one she's working extra shifts to pay for?" "He's studying computer science at Utrecht University. Good grades, according to what I could find. The daughter is apparently quite bright too." Lars thanked Nina and ended the call. As he sipped his coffee, he spotted Annika entering the hotel through a side entrance used by staff. She looked tired already, even though her day was just beginning. He watched as she stopped to help an elderly Asian couple who seemed confused about directions. Though he couldn't hear the conversation, he could see her gesturing patiently, then smiling as understanding dawned on their faces. When a coworker approached, looking stressed, Annika paused to speak with them too, patting their shoulder reassuringly before continuing on her way. In those brief interactions, Lars saw exactly what Global Talk needed. Someone who understood. That language wasn't just about words, but about connecting people. Annika couldn't stop thinking about her strange meeting with Lars Hendrickson the previous day. A job offer? The idea seemed ridiculous. What kind of position could a successful businessman possibly have for a hotel cleaner? Yet she found herself wondering as she changed sheets and wiped surfaces. What if? What if there was a chance to use her language skills again? What if she could earn more money for Thomas's education and start saving for Lena's? Daydreaming, Annika, Beatrice asked, startling her from her thoughts. That bathroom won't clean itself. Annika smiled apologetically. Sorry, just thinking. About that fancy man who asked for you yesterday? Beatrice raised an eyebrow. The whole staff is talking about it. What did he want? Nothing important, Annika said, not ready to share something she herself couldn't quite believe. Just some questions about the hotel. But later, as she ate her lunch in the small break room, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mrs. Visser, this is Lars Hendrickson. I hope you don't mind that I got your number from hotel management. I'd like to continue our conversation. Could you meet me after your shift today? There's a cafe across from the hotel. I'll be there at 5:30. Annika stared at the message, her sandwich forgotten. This was getting stranger by the minute. Part of her wanted to ignore it, to return to the safe routine of her life, but another part, a part she had silenced for years, whispered of possibilities. Her fingers hovered over the phone. What did she have to lose by listening? I'll be there, she typed, then pressed send before she could change her mind. The rest of her shift seemed to drag on forever. Every time she checked her watch, only minutes had passed. She cleaned with extra care, trying to focus on her tasks rather than the upcoming meeting. At exactly 5:15, she clocked out and went to the staff locker room to change out of her uniform. She had brought a simple blouse and jeans to change into. Nothing fancy, but at least she wouldn't be sitting in a cafe in her work clothes. As she brushed her hair and applied a touch of lipstick, something she rarely bothered with for work, she caught sight of herself in the mirror. The woman looking back at her seemed different somehow. There was a spark of something in her eyes that hadn't been there in years. Hope, she realized. It was hope. Don't be silly, she told her reflection firmly. He probably just wants some advice about the hotel or help with translations during his stay. But as she walked across the street to the cafe, she couldn't quiet the voice inside her that whispered, what if this is it? What if this is the moment everything changes? Through the cafe window, she could see Lars already waiting at a corner table, checking his watch. He looked up and saw her smiling and raising his hand in greeting. Annika took a deep breath and opened the door, stepping toward whatever future awaited her. The small cafe across from the Grand Plaza Hotel was busy with the evening crowd. Business people stopped for coffee before heading home. Tourists rested their tired feet, and locals chatted over pastries. In the corner, Lars Hendrickson had chosen a quiet table away from the main buzz. When Annika walked in, she felt immediately out of place. Her simple blouse and jeans were a far cry from the designer outfits worn by many of the cafe's customers. For a moment, she considered turning around and leaving. Then Lars spotted her and waved her over, his smile genuine and welcoming. Mrs. Visser, thank you for coming, he said, standing as she approached. Please, have a seat. Would you like something to drink? They make excellent hot chocolate here. Just water is fine, Annika replied, sliding into the chair opposite him. Her hands fidgeted nervously in her lap. Lars ordered for both of them anyway. Water for her and hot chocolate too, just in case you change your mind. When the waiter left, he turned his full attention to her. I'm sure you're wondering why I asked to meet with you, he began. Annika nodded. It's not every day a hotel cleaner gets a message from a... She hesitated, not knowing exactly what to call him. A guest? Lars offered with a small smile. A billionaire. Annika finished quietly. She had looked him up during her lunch break. Lars Hendrickson wasn't just any businessman. He was the founder of one of Europe's most successful tech companies. Lars chuckled. The internet makes it hard to keep a low profile these days. He leaned forward slightly. But I didn't ask you here to talk about me. I want to talk about you, Annika, and about an opportunity I think might interest you. The waiter returned, with their drinks. Annika took a sip of water, grateful for the momentary distraction. When she set down her glass, she noticed Lars watching her with keen interest. Yesterday I mentioned that I run Global Talk Technologies, he continued. What I didn't explain is that we're facing a significant challenge. We develop translation software and services, but the technology is only as good as the people who train and refine it. Annika nodded politely, still not understanding what this had to do with her. The problem is, Lars continued, most of our staff come straight from universities. They have degrees in linguistics or computer science, but very little practical experience with how language actually works in the real world. He paused to take a sip of his coffee. Our software can translate words, but it struggles with context, with cultural nuances, with the living, breathing way that people actually communicate. Annika found herself nodding. Because language isn't just about words, she said without thinking. It's about understanding people. Exactly. Lars's eyes lit up. That's exactly what I've been trying to explain to my development team for months. He leaned back in his chair. And that, Mrs. Visser, is why I'm interested in you. The hot chocolate sat untouched in front of Annika, steam rising in gentle curls. I don't understand, she said carefully. I'm not a programmer. I don't know anything about software development. But you know languages, Lars replied. Not just the grammar and vocabulary they teach in school, but how people actually use them. You've spent 15 years communicating with guests from all over the world, understanding their needs, bridging cultural gaps. Annika blinked in surprise. How do you know how long I've worked at the hotel? Lars had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. I did some checking, he admitted. When I find someone with remarkable abilities, I like to learn more about them. And what did you learn? Annika asked, unsure whether to be flattered or concerned. I learned that you're the most requested cleaner for international guests because you can communicate with anyone. I learned that you help other staff with translation during your breaks. And I learned about how you once helped an Italian guest who became ill, translating for the paramedics when no one else could. Annika remembered that day clearly. The elderly Italian man had been scared, clutching his chest and trying desperately to tell the Dutch paramedics about his heart medication. The panic in his eyes had been what drove her to step forward. Anyone would have helped if they could, she said softly. But not anyone could have, Lars pointed out. That's what makes you special, Annika, and that's why I want to offer you a position at Global Talk Technologies. Annika stared at him, certain she had misheard. A position? At your company? Doing what exactly? To start, as a language quality specialist, Lars explained. You would help evaluate our translation systems, identify cultural nuances, our algorithms, miss and train our staff on real-world language applications. Annika shook her head in disbelief. But I don't have a degree, I never finished university. Which is precisely why you're perfect for this role, Lars countered. We have plenty of people with degrees. What we need is someone with your practical experience and natural talent. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder, placing it on the table between them. This is a formal offer letter. The starting salary would be 3 times what you currently make at the hotel. Annika's eyes widened. With that kind of money, she could easily cover Thomas's university expenses and start saving for Lena's. She could finally move out of their cramped apartment into a proper house. She could... This can't be real, she whispered, afraid to touch the folder, as if it might disappear. It's very real, Lars assured her. And it includes full benefits, including educational support for your children. Annika's head snapped up at that. How do you know about my children? Lars's expression softened. As I said, I did some checking. I know you're working extra shifts to put your son through university. This position would make that considerably easier. Annika finally reached for the hot chocolate, taking a sip to steady herself. It was rich and sweet, a small luxury she rarely allowed herself. Just like the opportunity sitting in front of her. Too sweet, too good to be true. "Why me?" she asked, voicing the question that had been bothering her since their first conversation. "Out of all the people you could hire, why a hotel cleaner?" Lars considered his answer carefully. "Because talent doesn't always follow conventional paths, Annika. Sometimes the right person for a job isn't the one with the perfect resume, but the one with the perfect instincts." He smiled slightly. "My own background isn't what you might expect. I dropped out of university to start my first company. If someone hadn't taken a chance on me back then, I wouldn't be where I am today." Annika stared at the folder, her mind racing. It was an incredible opportunity, but also terrifying. The hotel job was safe, familiar. This would mean stepping into an unknown world. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I've been cleaning rooms for 15 years. I'm not sure I belong in a technology company." Lars nodded, understanding her hesitation. "That's fair, which is why I'm proposing a 6-month trial period. If it doesn't work out for any reason, I'll personally ensure that your position at the hotel remains available." He gestured toward the hotel across the street. "I've already spoken with your manager. He's willing to hold your job, though he said he'd hate to lose you." Annika was speechless. Lars had thought of everything, removing every obstacle, every excuse she might have for saying no. "You don't have to decide right now," Lars said gently. "Take the folder home, discuss it with your children, read through the details, and call me with any questions." He pulled out a business card and placed it on top of the folder. Annika finally picked up the folder, holding it like it contained something precious and fragile. In many ways, it did. It held the possibility of a different future. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I'll think about it." As she left the cafe and walked toward the bus stop, the folder tucked safely in her bag, Annika felt a strange mixture of hope and fear. After 8 years of just surviving since Johan died, could she really take this leap? The answer would come tomorrow, she decided. Tonight she needed to talk to her children. After all, this decision would change their lives too. 1 year later, Annika stood at the window of her office on the 12th floor of the Global Talk building. From here, she could see the canals of Amsterdam stretching out below her, boats drifting lazily in the afternoon sun. Sometimes, she still couldn't believe this was her life now. She remembered the night she had brought Lars's offer home to discuss with her children. How Thomas had jumped up from the dinner table shouting, "Take it, Mom, of course you should take it." How Lena had been quieter, worried about changes, but ultimately supportive. "You've spent your whole life taking care of us," Lena had said, holding her mother's hand. "Maybe it's time you did something for yourself too." The memory made Annika smile. She had been so afraid, terrified really, during her first week at Global Talk. Everything had seemed overwhelming. The sleek offices, the young university graduates with their technical terms, the computers that everyone except her seemed to understand perfectly. On her 3rd day, she had nearly quit, convinced she had made a terrible mistake. She remembered sitting in the bathroom fighting back tears when Nina, the head of recruitment who had helped Lars research her background, found her there. "The first week is the worst," Nina had told her kindly. "But Lars didn't hire you for what you already know about technology. He hired you for what you know about people." Those words had given her the courage to continue. And Nina had been right. Within a month, Annika had found her place at the company. Not in the technical development department, but as a bridge between the programmers and the real-world users of their products. A knock on her office door pulled Annika from her memories. "Come in," she called. Lars entered, looking much the same, as he had that day in the hotel room, though she no longer found his presence intimidating. "Ready for the board meeting?" he asked. Annika nodded, gathering her presentation folder. "As ready as I'll ever be." So much had changed in the past year. What had started as a simple position evaluating language quality had evolved into something much bigger. 3 months into her job, Annika had approached Lars with an idea. The software is brilliant, she had told him. But there's something missing. It translates the words perfectly, but misses the human element, the cultural context, the emotional nuances. Instead of dismissing her concerns, Lars had encouraged her to develop a solution. Working with a team of programmers, Annika had created a training program that taught technology specialists to recognize the subtle cultural factors that automated systems often missed. The program had been so successful internally that Lars had suggested offering it to other companies as a service. Now, a year later, cultural communication training had become Global Talk's fastest-growing division, and Annika had been promoted to director. Today, she would present the division's results to the board of directors for the first time. Despite her newfound confidence, she felt the familiar flutter of nervousness in her stomach. "You'll do fine," Lars assured her as they walked toward the conference room. "Just talk to them the way you talk to me about your ideas. They're just people, after all. Very rich, very powerful people," Annika pointed out with a small laugh, "who all struggled to order dinner in a foreign country at some point," Lars countered. The meeting went better than Annika could have hoped. The board members, initially skeptical of investing further in the soft skills division, were won over by the numbers. Revenue had doubled in the quarters since implementing her training program, and client satisfaction scores had reached record highs. But what truly convinced them was Annika herself. Her passionate explanation of how understanding cultural context could transform automated communication from merely accurate to genuinely meaningful. "The future of translation isn't just about words," she concluded. "It's about connection, and connection is fundamentally human." As the board members filed out, offering congratulations and handshakes, Annika felt a profound sense of accomplishment. This moment, standing in a boardroom, being respected for her mind rather than her ability to make a bed quickly, would have seemed impossible just a year ago. Later that evening, Annika unlocked the door to her new home, a charming two-story house near the Canal District. The smell of cooking greeted her as she stepped inside. "Mom's home," Thomas called from the kitchen. He had moved back in for the summer break from university and was attempting to cook dinner with Lena. "How did it go?" Lena asked, rushing to hug her mother. At 17, she was almost as tall as Annika now and already planning her university applications. She wanted to study medicine, a dream that once seemed financially impossible but was now within reach. "It went well," Annika said, setting down her briefcase. "Very well, actually. The board approved the expansion budget." "That means you're getting a raise, right?" Thomas grinned, stirring something that smelled suspiciously like it was burning. "It means the program can help more people," Annika corrected him. "Though there would indeed be a raise." She took the spoon from him and rescued what appeared to be pasta sauce. "And it means we can afford to order takeout when you burn dinner." Thomas laughed, not at all offended. He had his father's easy smile and good nature. "Hey, I'm a computer science major, not a chef." As they sat around the dinner table, eventually eating the slightly overcooked pasta that Thomas had insisted on finishing, Annika marveled at how much their lives had changed. Thomas was thriving at university, no longer working part-time, jobs to cover expenses. Lena was excited about her future, researching medical schools with the knowledge that finances wouldn't stand in her way. And Annika herself had transformed from someone who felt invisible to someone whose ideas were valued and respected. The confidence she had once possessed as a young linguistics student had returned, strengthened by years of practical experience and life wisdom. After dinner, as Thomas and Lena argued playfully over whose turn it was to wash dishes, Annika stepped out onto the small balcony overlooking the canal. The evening light turned the water golden, and bicycles rattled over the bridges below. Amsterdam had always been her home, but now she felt like she truly belonged in every part of it, not just the service areas of luxury hotels. Her phone buzzed, with a message from Lars. "Congratulations again on today. The board was impressed, but not as impressed as I was a year ago, when I overheard you speaking Dutch in room 712. Annika smiled as she typed her reply. Thank you for seeing something in me that I had forgotten was there. The next morning, Annika took a slight detour on her way to work, walking past the Grand Plaza Hotel. Through the lobby windows, she could see Beatrice directing the cleaning staff, clipboard in hand. Annika waved, and her former colleague smiled and waved back. Occasionally, Annika returned to the hotel, not as a cleaner but as a guest speaker for business conferences held in the grand ballroom. The staff who had once worked alongside her now pointed her out to newcomers, proud of their connection to her success story. But perhaps the most meaningful change hadn't been the title or the salary, or even the new house. It had been the creation of the Visser Opportunity Grant, a scholarship fund established by Global Talk for service workers pursuing education in linguistics and cultural studies. The first recipient had been a young bellhop from the Grand Plaza who spoke 4 languages and dreamed of becoming an interpreter. The look on his face when Annika had presented the award had reminded her of herself at his age, full of hopes that life had temporarily sidetracked but never fully erased. That moment had taught her the most important lesson of her journey. Sometimes, the most valuable skill isn't speaking multiple languages, but recognizing the potential in others that they might not even see in themselves.